Good morning. Can you hear me at the back?
We can.
That's good. Just before we start this session on research, a lot of you may or may not know that we have a parallel conference in Europe each year, and we've been to such exotic places as Manchester, England, where it always rains. We've been to Malta, we've been to Monaco, where the Crown Prince opened our conference, and that was really interesting.
And two of our participants wanted to marry the Crown Prince.
Two of our participants did, yes, yes. Marilyn and Amy are not here. And we went to Thessalonica. We made Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro European for a few days. So we get around. And just to tell you that early next May 2010, we're going to hold a conference in Zagreb, which is the capital of Croatia. And it's a really nice place, so watch the web and we'll let you know all the details. But if you can get along there, it will be pretty good. I've been coming to this conference since the second one 10 years ago, and you know, this agenda, I think, has been one of the best we've had. And this session on research, I think, is going to be really good. The first session is Graham Gall, methods to restrict access to sensitive information in continuous reporting. Graham.
Good morning. Can you hear me in the back? No? Okay.
We need a microphone.
Does this work now? Okay. What I want to describe is a project that we're undertaking at the University of Massachusetts with some of the people in operations research, and I was talking to some of the doctoral students here last night, and we may have some of them interested in this as well. What I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about, just as a review, I talked last year at this conference about the general problem of if we go to continuous reporting, some of the issues that arise. So I want to talk about that general problem, some approaches to that that we've suggested. We're going to look at modeling of query histories and restricting further disclosure and some of the collusion issues which arise when we have continuous reporting. Basically, we can look at continuous reporting on a number of dimensions. First is the expanded information set, and we heard yesterday about EBR. There's a lot of discussion now about expanding the amount of information that's being disclosed. And so it could be, we get accounts payable, but it could be subsidiary. It could be further down, even to the transaction level. And so we may expand both the level of detail and the information, so we may have information that's considered operational as opposed to simply financial. And then we can also talk about the time lag. Transaction happens in Japan, and now it's available right now. So the time lag between when events occur and when they can be reported or accessed is another dimension that we can talk about. And then query language, and that's an issue as well, because anytime I go to a website, I'm going through Google or something like that, I actually am generating a query, and there's some response to that. I was on a dissertation in our computer science department, and the person was doing it on indexing of large document collections, and he's now at a company that has a huge name. And the problem is, and this is one question that he could not answer, he could prove to me that the document return met the criteria, but he could not prove, and this is still, and I don't think he hasn't gotten back to me about the proof on this, that he did not miss anything. So even though the documents that were returned met the criteria, he could not say, I didn't miss one. And that's a problem because if I'm searching, obviously if I go to, let's say I want something on investments, and I only get, 100,000 hits, did I miss the 101st, and is that an important one as well? Then the other issue that we have, and this is one that I think is going to will become critical when we talk about continuous reporting, is a definition of what sensitive information is. And yesterday we heard someone talk about credit cards. Credit cards are easy to block. I mean, yes, they get away sometimes, but that's an easy thing to block. There are other kinds of sensitive information that I can find out. Things like someone's salary. That's a simple one. Maybe not. There are ways to get around it. How about Coca-Cola's formula for making Coke? that would be considered sensitive information. How about the timing of a company going out to market to buy a particular raw material and going out and saying, I'm going to buy this raw material, and they have the timing? If someone knew about that before the company went out, that could be a big problem for them. When we talk about continuous reporting as well, we have some materiality issues that haven't arisen and we haven't considered yet. For instance, if I make a disclosure of a particular element as opposed to a whole financial statement. Right now, materiality is considered in the context of the entire statement. But if I make a disclosure of a particular piece of information, accounts payable or something like that, but that's the only piece I disclose, do the same materiality issues hold? And we haven't addressed that yet either. And then finally, what do we consider adequate disclosure? If the SEC wants to use corporate websites as a means of disclosure, then if I disclose something and the website goes down, have I made the, do I meet the adequate disclosure? Is there insider trading issues because someone else brought my website down and now I can't disclose it? It will come out in 90 days on my quarterly report, but now someone else knows about that now. So all these are issues that arise when we talk about continuous reporting that have not really been addressed. Now, as soon as I use corporate websites or get this continuous reporting, however, but I think it's going to be on corporate websites, we have ways of making inferences that are not related to the sensitive piece of information. So for instance, here's a time-based inference. What are the total salaries for Department A? Now, if I know that someone's about to be hired in Department A, then I ask the same query in 2 days, and I now have that piece of information, even though I never asked for person A's salary. And I have it now, even though I've never asked for a piece of sensitive information. And that's what we call a time-based inference. Then we have these inference chains. This has been one of the approaches. If you look at statistical databases, they talk about these what are called inference chains. And an inference chain is basically, you can think of creating these subsets on it. And so, how much sugar was on hand Monday? How much Coke syrup, and so on. And if I ask enough queries, and there's a proof in the computer science literature that if I allow you to ask enough queries, I can get at any piece of information. And it doesn't matter whether I've ever asked for sensitive information at all, I can get to it. So you have to restrict the way in which I get to it. Now, the way inference chains handle it is they allocate tokens to people using their, making the queries on the statistical database. And so you ask a question, token is taken away. Ask another question, your token is taken away. And let's say the inference chain is 10 queries long, you get 9 tokens. And so you can't ask that 10th query, so you can't get it. The problem with inference chains is that we have to refund tokens. So for instance, if I say how much sugar was on hand Monday, but then a purchase comes in of sugar, or we get a receipt of sugar on Tuesday, then that piece of the chain is no longer valid. And I have to know if I'm going to run an intelligent query system to refund that token to that user because they haven't really got that information anymore. Now, the question is, should I disclose to them that that piece of information is not valid anymore, or should I just refund the token? And those are questions that have not been answered as well. Now, the auditor's challenge is to restrict, or an internal audit or external audit, to restrict access to sensitive information. How are we going to do that? And we have to, first of all, and this is a problem for management, has to define what sensitive information is. Are individual salaries sensitive? Are my raw material purchases sensitive? And we have to define that. And not only do we have to define that, we have to define the confidence interval, if you will, around that. Because if I know someone's salary within $10, is that okay? Or is that $100,000 close enough? And so on. Okay. And then I mentioned this earlier. We have to discuss what is adequate disclosure. What is appropriate release? How does information going to be released in a continuous reporting system? If it's available, has that been released? If no one asked for it, and it's, but I make it available, is that released? Right now, we have formal ways of producing reports that come out, and there are dates that those reports come out. Website disclosure is a very different animal. What is the appropriate level of detail that should be restricted? What is adequate disclosure and level of detail? Is that enough, or and levels of detail? And one of the problems that if we do this syntactically, so I say this field is restricted, and it turns out that that's the credit card.